Hey, what's up, everybody? This is the Political Brown Kid. Also, you can call me PBK for short if you feel like it. And I do want to welcome you all to tuning in to me, and I want to thank you for tuning in and or listening to me. Probably only going to be very few people out there listening to me because I've had several iterations of the Political Brown Kid released, and they didn't go anywhere. But hopefully this time, and even with this climate and the climate, just to give you a little bit of background, just in case someone's listening 20 years from now, it's June of 2020. We've had the coronavirus, aka COVID-19, or COVID-19, aka coronavirus. We've had the death of George Floyd, the unfortunate death of George Floyd, which has sparked many outrage globally, as well as a lot of protests that have escalated into other things. And you have a lot of media having a lot of discussion. And of course, I've been having, again, many iterations of this platform, Political Brown Kid, which really hasn't gone anywhere. Don't know why. I guess I'm just not a popular person. Never really have been, just been a middle of the road person. Hopefully something can catch on with this one, because the purpose of me creating this platform is really to kind of educate people, educate Black people, number one, because there's a lot of misguided Black individuals from Nubian descent that really they're going down a wrong path. And anytime you start driving a car and you're on the wrong road and you think you're going one way but you're not, you're in trouble. So you can throw out many solutions as far as you want, but until you start pointing yourself in the right direction, you're not going to go anywhere. And until you understand the road and you understand your car, you're not going to go anywhere. So my purpose here is to kind of provide context and or information and real world experiences that I have. And not only me, but experiences that people that I know have. When you live and walk and breathe this, I can provide a lot of information and a lot of background to the racial issues in America, and they're not really getting solved. We have the brightest minds working on this, or so-called the brightest minds, and they don't know what they're talking about because they're trying to appease certain groups. And as the famous General Colin Powell once said, when you try to please or appease or please everyone, you wind up pleasing no one. You can't please everyone. And sometimes hard truths, inconvenient truths must be said. And that's what you're going to find here. So the purpose of me doing this is really to provide those inconvenient truths, to provide you with education, and to provide you with reality, to take a pragmatic look. We can't keep throwing out hopeful solutions. You have to be pragmatic and realistic about this. And I want people to listen and learn and understand. Now, with that being said, some things that you're going to hear on this podcast through this medium, it's going to be some things that a lot of people are probably going to get ticked off with. And I'm saying ticked off to put it mildly. You're probably going to be cursing me out after you hear some of the things that come out of my mouth. You're probably going to think I'm crazy, and you're probably going to get tuned out. But what I'm going to try to tell you to do is, I can't give you all of the information in one post, because if I do that, it's going to be pretty much a 40-hour rant. And I'm not trying to do that. I mean, most people are not digesting. We're in 2020 when I'm making this. Most people get their information in bits and chunks. If you look on certain social media platforms or media platforms, most of the information is given out in 5 to 10 minutes. You can't do that with race. So you're going to have a lot of different podcasts or posts coming from me that's going to talk in certain sections. I'm going to try to be specific. I'm going to try to give specificity to certain topics. And if you listen all the way through to all of the posts, you'll get the full context, because when you listen to one or two posts, you're probably going to walk away saying, boy, the Political Brown Kid is racist as hell. But some of the stuff that I'm going to say is necessary. The stuff that I'm going to say is going to be very necessary. It's going to be very relevant, and it's going to be the truth. And that's what I'm here to give you, is the truth. It's going to be the truth about our failures as Black people, but it's definitely going to be some truths about the failures of whites. And whether those failures were intentional or not, we're going to talk about them. So again, what I want you to do is take away from this is number one, I'm not trying to be prejudiced. There's a difference between being racist and prejudiced. Blacks aren't racist. We don't have that power of control in society to be racist. So learn the difference. And I think that that's some of the things and some of the posts that I'm going to put out is understanding terminology. I'm going to try not to be prejudiced in my posts, but some of the stuff is going to come off that way. But some of the things that I'm going to say is relevant and necessary. I do not perceive myself to be a prejudiced person, but some of the stuff that I'm going to say is going to probably be prejudiced in nature because there's a point, a psychological point that Black people need to deal with, as well as financial points, as well as just social and interacting, as well as etiquette that we need to talk about. So I want you to walk away with that, knowing that this is intended to bash white people or other, well, it's not to the extent that, where hopefully you're not hating them, but you're going to wind up hating a lot of things that they have done and said. You're going to wind up hating a lot of things that certain Blacks have done and said. And we're going to call some of those Black people out by name. And we're going to call some of these white platforms out by name. But you have to understand, I'm not trying to really be racist, or should I say prejudice. Get along with everyone. We hope to, but this is an effort to help everyone heal, because that's really what we need to do. But in order for Black people to take those steps forward, we need to really take a lot of steps backwards. And that's what I want you to get to understand, because I'm trying to set a foundation here, because once I start talking in my other various posts, you're going to start hearing some things that you probably are going to view to be racist, or should I say prejudice. Now, with that being said, in regards to just the kind of trying to give you a little bit of background and understanding about my intention and, background about me. The one thing that I want to start off with this inaugural podcast is Black people, you're truly unique to every other race on this planet. You are really in a unique situation. You are a unique people. We are a unique people, should I say, as Nubians. You have a unique physical makeup. And not to say that Asians don't, because you can readily identify people from an Asian background. You can readily identify people from a Caucasian background and from an indigenous American background. But when you look at Blacks, Nubians, you can honestly say that, hey, as far as from our genetic makeup, we do have a distinct look to us. Asians and or whites, they are fair-skinned individuals. We tend to be darker-skinned individuals. There are some Asians, particularly Filipinos, who they do have Nubian descent, Nubian background in them. And so you will find that some of those are dark, and you'll see some Asians that are darker. But for the most part, Asians and whites, particularly, they're lighter, fair skin. They have thinner or finer hair, and their features are, for the most part, there's some Asians, they do have broader nose features, but their features are pretty much kind of in line with one another for the most part. They're distinct, but for the most part, you can say that. But the two physical features really that you're pointing to is really the hair texture and the skin tone. Blacks, aka Nubians, we tend to have coarser hair. Now notice I'm saying we tend to, because I'm going to also make another point that Blacks have a more diverse gene pool than any other race. But Blacks, for the most part, they have coarser hair, and they have, you look at the darker skin, and you look at the lips, and those features are more pronounced than those other groups. We have darker skin, our skin stands out, our hair stands out, and our lips stand out. Again, and I will say this leading into that, our gene pool is more diverse. You can look at individuals, because even though I mentioned the coarser hair, That doesn't apply to all of them. That doesn't apply to Egyptians, the original Egyptians. And we'll have a podcast on that, because what you're seeing today is not reflective of true Egyptians. Just like if I brought an alien here from Mars, and that alien, or even from another galaxy, if an alien came here doing recon for his planet and he came to America, he had to write a history or report on the world, he would come to the notion that the people who occupied North America and the American continent, the original settlers, were Caucasians, when we know that they were Native Americans, and those Native Americans have been pretty much wiped out. And you see remnants of them left over through people of Latin America descent, from Mexico, and they're kind of just pushed and scattered throughout reservations in the United States. But I'm digressing. But again, black people, you look at your genes, the people who of sub-Saharan Africa and of Kush, Nubia, going to be coarser hair, darker skin. You look at the people of Kemet, Egypt, they are still African Nubians, and they are still brown people. Their hair is a little finer. Their skin tone may be not as dark, and some of them are dark. Then you look at, but we're talking more so about the hair texture. The hair texture is thinner, but they're still Nubian. You look at Eritreans. You look at Somalians. You look at the Aborigine. And I know I'm forgetting one other group, but those individuals can have thinner hair. People always want to associate the broader nostrils to Nubians, aka blacks, and that could be true, but you can also look and you can say that, but that's not always the case, because like I said, the gene pool is diverse. You can look at a lot of Kenyans, they don't have those wide nostrils. You can look at a lot of the gene pool of Africa is very diverse. And like I said, you look at the Aborigines. The Aborigines have a silky fine hair. Some of them do. And then the men curlier hair, but they don't have the coarse hair as you see on the continent of Africa. And then you can even look towards India. I know that a lot of them like to consider themselves Caucasians, talk about the Caucasus Mountains, but you look at them and a lot of them are Nubian, or maybe they had Nubian descent from being so close to Nubia, and there was some intermingling there, but you see the background. But what I'm basically saying is that the gene pool of blacks are very diverse, as opposed to, you're not going to see that type of diversity within Caucasian race. You'll see that when you're talking about Asians who are people of color, you'll see more diversity there. Like you can see the diversity in it's not as pronounced as with blacks, because I guess as the skin gets lighter, I don't know, but their gene pool isn't as diverse. And then you look at whites, this really, they have diversity as far as some features. Like if, people talk about people from Irish being more red hair, you see that, that gene running dominant there, but there's really not that much diversity. And this is, again, not to point out anything not to try and make one race seem better than the other. I'm just pointing out uniqueness in feature. Now, if we want to talk about uniqueness in experience, and I'm talking about world experience, your experience is definitely different. That's why I say you are unique. You have your experience as far as being enslaved. It runs very deep. It runs deep. If you look in the book in the Bible, all the way up to 1868, 1863 in America, or somewhere around that time. Your experience as far as being subjugated is definitely different than any other race on this planet. I mean, they tried it with the Native Americans. It did not work. Of course, Europeans are going to try and point to they had slavery. Yeah, they had indentured servitude, which were people that were freed after working off a debt for 7 years. Africans had indentured servitude as well. But then once the Africans got sold here to the United States, thinking that the slave system was similar to theirs, it was a totally different ballgame. You were totally, the term slave took on a real meaning. And that was your experience. And no other race has had that type of experience. And again, I will say this: the Jewish people have had a similar Holocaust experience. Now, that wasn't more as far as slavery, that was just as far as pretty much brutal execution and, torture and experimentation on a group of people. And that was just pure extermination, which again was a horrific thing. I'm not condoning any of this. I'm just pointing out facts. Black people, you've had a similar experience, but your experience was more being captured, being psychologically traumatized, and being financially disenfranchised. And you really, if you look at it, the black race wasn't free in America until 1863, 1868, somewhere in the 1860s. I don't know. I'm not a history. I don't have my dates correct, but around the late 1800s. And then you look after the late 1800s, you had to endure Jim Crow. And then from the 1800s all the way up until the 50s, 40s, 60s, I don't know, you had to endure segregation. So we're just talking the American continent. There's no other race that has had your experience. There's no other race that has had global slavery applied to them. They may have been enslaved by their own people. Like, I don't know, in Asia, maybe in Asia they had slavery, they had slaves working there, but it was probably one group of Asians dominated another group or another tribe or another city or, another dynasty. Same within Africa, where you had where the Zulus actually kind of spread over, under the reigns of Shaka. He took over and expanded the African dynasty, but you may have had terms of slavery that I don't know. Again, I'm not a history buff as far as what enslavement looked like on other continents. But what I'm trying to tell you is, from a global perspective, you can't name one race other than blacks who were transported from one continent all over to all of the other continents except Asia, for the most part. You don't really hear about that, to work as slaves, except blacks. And that is a very unique experience. You haven't had that experience where one group was colonized. The Caucasians went and colonized, except for, you can apply that to the Native Americans, the indigenous Americans. They've had that, where they were pretty much overrun when, the Americans came, when the Europeans came here to North America and colonized America and quote unquote founded a place that other people had already been to. But they were pretty much just wiped out off of the North American continent. Put up a good fight, but they were ultimately wiped out. But you look at it, so the Native Americans, the indigenous Americans, have had similar experiences with whites in that regard. And they were also there was an attempt to enslave them, but it did not work. But you look at blacks, the Portuguese came and really just took blacks all over the world, even to the Caribbean. They took them to Europe. They took them to North America. They took them to South America. They took them to the islands, which is Jamaica, Bahamas, Bermuda, Dominican Republic, and South America, and Haiti. And they took you all over. So that's why they call it the diaspora. You've been spread all over. And that is your unique experience. And you've also had an experience where there was a system put in place to make you seem inferior, less than human. You were legally classified as not human. You were classified as cattle. And it took 8 black humans to equal one human being. And I want to say there was 8 black male humans to equal one human being. And here's something else that you should think about while we're on that subject of talking about classification. You notice that, and we're talking about the uniqueness of black people as well as classification. You're the only race on this planet that needed legislation in order to free you, be considered free. And also, you need legislation now, which they're doing in the year 2019. Some states and or cities have started doing so, is to legalize, or providing protective legislation for your hair texture. You're the only race. Look it up. I'm not lying to you. You're the only race that needs legislation passed. You're not natural. It wasn't natural. No one, for every other race, it's been organic. They've been free. You've needed legislation signed into law by man to say you're free. You've needed legislation signed into law to say you can't discriminate against this person because of their hair texture. So this is what I mean when I say your experience is very unique. And this is why I'm just doing this. I'm just kind of throwing this out as far as to give you some background as an introduction as you start to look at my other posts. The other thing I want you to look at when you start getting into my posts and understanding why I'm saying some of the things that I say, you're going to have to understand numbers games. Numbers are important. And I'm going to have a separate post on that. And hopefully that'll be the second one, because you're going to have to understand that this podcast, this inaugural podcast, is a foundation that you need to grasp, as well as you need to understand the numbers in which you're dealing with, which I'm going to post next, hopefully. But if it's not in sequence, please look for it, because it's going to give you a better context around a lot of the things that I say and the position that I hold. So again, understand your uniqueness, embrace it. Yes, you do have a troubled past, but a lot of other races can say they've had troubled past as well, even though our past has just been horrendous. But we need to figure out a way to move forward, and we need to figure out a way to educate the next generation and these younger generations, because I see these Generation Zers, they just really don't get it. They assume that everything is right with the world, and then when they grow up, they realize that things are not. And people, I think millennials and even baby boomers, they think that, we've overcome. We've reached the Martin Luther King era, or more specifically, or even better than the Martin Luther King era, we've reached the Obama era, and the world is a better place. And it's not. It's still 1800s all over. Matter of fact, it's 1400s all over again. It's just in the 21st century. So again, this is the Political Brown Kid. I do appreciate you for listening, and I do thank you for listening. And I hope that you give me an opportunity, and I hope that you open your mind to what I'm going to be saying on this platform. And if you do have any feedback for me, I hope that you reach out. And this is the Political Brown Kid. Check out my other posts. Thank you for listening.